for a devotee?
Being service.
Service, yeah.
Krishna conscious.
Being Krishna conscious, yeah. Because Lord Brahma says that, despite the good and bad reactions that come to a devotee, if they remain fixed in the devotional service, then in due course of time, once all the good and bad reactions are burnt up, then all that's left is pure devotional service, which means we will be in our eternal constitutional position of bliss and knowledge. Right now, we might not experience that. Sometimes we get a little insight into it. So I wanted to ask a question. Hands up those who have read Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita. Hands up, right up. Okay, so that's good. Good number of devotees there. And for those who haven't, maybe you don't know what it is, so we'll excuse you on that. And there are other biographies. Anyone read any other biographies of Srila Prabhupada? What have you read? And Dokshija, what have you read?
Chasing Rhinos.
What?
Chasing Rhinos.
Chasing Rhinos with the Swami, yeah. Jayananda?
Swarming in a strange land.
Swimming in a Strange Land. A Transcendental Diary.
Yeah. So a few things like speaking strongly on Srila Prabhupada, like Bhakti-Vikas Maharaj, and Mood and Mission of Srila.
Okay. So I was looking more for like biography, but that's also good because that's taken from Prabhupada's words, Prabhupada's writings, that's fine. So this is important. If you want to get to know Krishna, then we have to hear about Krishna and we have to hear from Krishna. So we hear from Krishna from where? Bhagavad Gita. And we hear about Krishna from Srimad Bhagavatam. So we hear from Prabhupada from the books he's written and from the devotees who had his personal association, from the recordings. Thankfully, the devotees had the wherewithal to start recording Prabhupada from very early days. And this is really amazing stuff. I remember in the days of, for some of the youngsters who are possibly, I don't know what youngster would mean in terms of this technology, but anybody not seen a tape recorder before? A cassette tape recorder? Yeah, do you even know what it is? Maybe you've seen one in a museum? Wow. That's for like some of us, it was like seeing the 78 records. The technology is gone. So in those days, actually, you had a cassette player and a cassette tape, and your possessions would be maybe one or two tapes. And I remember our Bhakti leaders and Shivaram Swami also chastising the devotees for rewinding the tape and wasting the batteries. So that we just have to turn the tape over and play it wherever it started. But having one tape, I remember I had one tape for a long time and I just listened to it over and over again. And I never felt at any time that it was boring. And you always feel like you're becoming more and more deep in that understanding of what Prabhupada is saying. So just like Krishna's words are unfathomable, then the words of pure devotee of Krishna, also it's not that we come to the point where, okay, I've learned that next. It's not Krishna consciousness, not just a series of courses. And at the time of death, then the vision duties come along and say, okay, how many courses have you done? What's your marks? These things are good for the purpose of helping us understand better, for our own understanding and being able to convey the message of Krishna consciousness. But really, what's more important is putting these things into practice. And Prabhupada was extremely practical. He was very practical in application of Krishna consciousness, and he would show that to the devotees in many ways which were surprising to them. So when Prabhupada was in Russia, for example, you've not heard the story yet. When Prabhupada was in Russia, for example, then the devotees had nothing much in terms of kitchenware to cook. So the devotee, all they could get after standing in line with some potatoes and rice and milk, so they made a lot of sweet rice, and they'd made so much of it that We were finding all sorts of pots and pans to put it in, even the lota, which was in the toilet. So Prabhupada put the value of prasadam more, not to waste prasadam, over and above what you might consider something muchi or unclean. So by reading Prabhupada's Lilamritas, the various accounts that the devotees have with Prabhupada, you can learn the practicality of engaging in devotional service. Otherwise, if we don't get to know Prabhupada's mood and the mission which he is representing, which is non-different from Lord Krishna's mission, non-different from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission, then we run the very real risk of either becoming sahajas or becoming all about rules and regulations, smarta, where it's so important that we follow the breakfast on this specific titi, but at the same time, we're hardly even following any of the principles, or we're just up to all sorts of nonsense. We watch television for 6 hours a day, but we have to break fast on this particular time. So, let's see what's really important. I'm not getting on anyone's case about that, but I'm just thinking, to get things in perspective and get the priorities right, then understanding Prabhupada is so important, because it's been prophesied that this mission would spread to every town and village, and that is happening. So recently I've been reading Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhava by Bhakti Maharaj, and it's very nice. There's so many god brothers of Srila Prabhupada who were very well qualified, very nice devotees. And some of them had also been given the opportunity to come to the West, but they didn't have much success. And then the last part I was reading about that particular category was, there was one brahmachari who was asked to go, but he didn't want to go because he wanted to be near his Guru Maharaj. So obviously Vapu, or personal association, was more important to him than Vani, the instruction. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta kind of gave a few hints, and on occasion, sometimes it was, in retrospect, it was obvious to the devotees afterwards. So although Prabhupada was a householder, and generally the various sannyasis who were the senior disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, then if somebody wanted to meet him, then they would go through that person. But Srila Prabhupada would just walk right in, and nobody would stop him. And on occasion, if Srila Bhaktisiddhanta seen Prabhupada there, he'd call him to his room, and he'd be with him for hours. It was also mentioned that sometimes Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would give out some Mahaprasad, but with Srila Prabhupada, they never seen anybody who'd get a full plate of Maha, and they would sit together and eat. And so this brahmachari, when he was asked to go to the West to preach, and he didn't refuse, but he just made it clear that he'd rather stay back. Then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, Abai will go, he can do this, he speaks good English, he's a good preacher, he will do it. So that was there. And also once he was giving a lecture to a big Pandal festival with thousands of people there, and he was talking about the prediction of someone who would go to the West, and he would take that mission and bring all the other nationalities back to the Holy Dham, bring them back to India. And as he was saying this, then he was speaking in general to everybody, then he turned and he stared at Srila Prabhupada for about a minute in silence, and then he carried on again. And the devotee who was next to him understood that this is significant. He made the prediction, he said, I predict that one of my disciples will go to the West. And also we find in the Srimad Bhagavatam that although irregularly composed, when heard, sung and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest. So this is taken as an indication of Srila Prabhupada. Because if you read Srila Prabhupada's first edition of the Bhagavatam, then his English wasn't as good. And even when he came to the West at first, hearing him speak, his accent is quite thick, so a bit difficult to understand. So therefore, when Prabhupada's Yukta Vairagya principle came into play, and I think it was 66, there was one boy who was staying at the ashram in 26 2nd Avenue. he was just there for the summer holidays, and he was engaged in doing some transcription of Prabhupada's tapes. He couldn't understand words, so we ended up with the first edition of Bhagavad Gita saying the planet of the Pitris. So where it should say planet of the Pitris, he thought it's Prabhupada says the planet of the trees. But Prabhupada knew that a blind uncle's better than no uncle, so he thought we just have to get this teaching out there, and then we can correct things, we can do things later. But unfortunately, you get people who take a screenshot of something then and there and think that has to be what it is forevermore, rather than taking the essence. And Prabhupada gave permission to Jayadvaita Swami, to correct any grammar or anything like that, because he had faith in his disciples. Also, we had one devotee, Hayagriva, when Prabhupada mentioned the Bhagavad Gita about being clean-shaven, he took that out because he preferred to have a beard. No offense again, anyone who doesn't shave, but Prabhupada wanted his disciples to be clean-shaven, but Hayagriva preferred to have a beard, so he didn't include that, thinking, that Prabhupada wouldn't notice or something. But so there's one occasion here just to show you that Prabhupada was sometimes misunderstood. There was one devotee conveyed to Prabhupada something which was a bit independent, and Prabhupada says, they think I'm an old man. They're just waiting for me to die. He says, they think I'm an old man. Then there was another occasion where he was walking, you find this in the Prabhupada Nectar book, he was walking from the Ganges to the Mayapur property, and there was a steep embankment, and I think it was Bhavananda was trying to help him up the hill, so he took his arm. And Prabhupada turned around, kicked him in the chest, and ran up to the top of the hill. And he said, you think I'm an old man? I'm Nava Yovana, I'm eternally youthful. So Prabhupada was not limited by that body, just we are, because we are more in a bodily concept and we are not on that platform. But sometimes the devotees misunderstood Srila Prabhupada to be like that. But when we read about all these different things from Prabhupada Nectar, Prabhupada Leelamrita, etc., then we get to know Prabhupada. So I don't think any of us here have met Srila Prabhupada in person. And I say this many times, but it's not that we don't feel that we don't know him. So two places Prabhupada said he could be found. Anybody name one or two of them? Books. Find these books, and another one.
Instruction.
Radha Damodar. Yeah, in the books, instructions in the books, so that's the same, it covers that. But in the Radha Damodar temple. And in the wake of Srila Prabhupada coming to the West, then so many other people come along. It's just like someone invents something, and then someone else comes along and they do it and they take credit for it, or they try to jump on the bandwagon, isn't it? There was, I think it was Sir Isaac Newton. Some of his contemporaries were criticizing him, thinking, anybody could have done what you did. And they said, okay, can you make this egg stand on its end? So they were all trying to balance it. And then he took it and he just tapped it a little bit so it went flat in the bottom and it stood. And then they said, anyone could have done it. He says, yes, but I did it. They didn't. So with Prabhupada, he did it. He broke the teeth of Kali by what he did. And it wasn't simply that he was just a wonderful trailblazer. He was actually empowered by Krishna. He was fulfilling a prophecy. And Prabhupada revealed that Krishna had asked him to come. Just like sometimes we ask to do some service, no, I'd rather do something else, but we surrender to it. Well, Prabhupada also, he surrendered to come into the material world. Just think, just imagine you finally get back to the material world after doing everything you got to do to get out of here, and Krishna says, can you go back? You go, I just got here. You'd be thinking, I don't want to go back there. And Prabhupada's mood was like, I don't want to go back to that terrible place. Or I don't want to go to that terrible place. Not that he had to go back, but I don't want to go to that terrible place. But he did it out of love for Krishna. So this is such an example. And who at the age of 70 gives up, devotees generally, they'll think, when I get to 65, 70, I'll retire to Vrindavan and Mayapur. Right? That's quite natural for devotees to think like that. We think, well, that would be great, just to retire in the Holy Dham. And Prabhupada's mood was different. What was his mood? Yeah. He was in a situation where he could have remained there, but he left it all to come to the West because of great compassion and because of his own compassion, seeing the suffering, and also the compassion of the parampara. They're all considering the welfare of the living entities. And this is Lord Chaitanya's mood. So just as Lord Chaitanya is Patita Pavana by saving Jaga and Madai, then Srila Prabhupada, when he went to the West, first of all, he was staying with the Butlers in Pennsylvania, not the Agarwals in Butler, Pennsylvania. And then he moved to New York. Yes, New York. And whereabouts in New York was he staying? No.
I know Dr. Mishra's ashram.
That's right, yeah. So he went to the kind of the upper, what location is that area called? Yeah, it was, whatever it was kind of, he was rubbing shoulders with the uptown swamis, but then he couldn't tolerate it because they were just speaking nonsense Mayavadi philosophy. So he realized, I can't stay here any longer, because his mission was not going to be fulfilled, and he could see that. So he was walking the streets, wondering what to do. And thank you. And one devotee seen him. Does anyone remember which devotee it was that seen him? I'm asking because I can't remember. Mukunda, was it Mukunda? So Mukunda Maharaj seen him, and he was known as Michael Grant at the time. And the devotee, the people in that lower east side, which was known as the Bowery, which was a place where all the drug addicts, hippies, bums, and that hung out. It was even mentioned that Prabhupada would have to step over drunken bums who had urinated themselves to get into his apartment. Even one time, I think he had to step over a dead body to get into his apartment. His typewriter was stolen. Imagine you just written a book and your typewriter was stolen, your manuscript had gone. You'd think, that's a sign from Krishna to go back to Vrindavan. And even Prabhupada thought about it, but he didn't do it. This is the human aspect of Prabhupada. But what did he do? He starts writing again. And this is a great lesson, and this endeavor is no loss or diminution. And his spiritual master told him, if no one's listening, then preach to the four walls. So Krishna arranged that he would meet some interested parties there who were considered to be on the bottom rung of the social ladder, considered to be social rejects by the general society. Of course, general society is full of hypocrisy, because what they consider to be cultured is Mleccha culture, Yavana culture. It's not really culture. It's just polished animalism, or intellectual animalism, as we call it. And Prabhupada pointed this out very clearly, this eating, sleeping, mating, and defending his animal propensities. And right from the very beginning, if you hear Prabhupada's lectures, he's speaking very straightforwardly. And he's also very kind. And his mission of being compassionate to everybody, you could see in the Leela Amritas. For example, there was one drunken, homeless guy comes in, stinking to the high heavens, as they say. And all the devotees were looking at him thinking, who's this guy? Should we chuck him out? And Prabhupada just allowed him to come in. And he went to Prabhupada and gave some toilet rolls. Then he went and sat in the corner and crashed out. And the Prabhupada took that because he wanted to engage everybody in service. And there was also one alcoholic who came to Prabhupada saying, that he liked the food and he liked the talks, but he couldn't practice it because he's an alcoholic. And Prabhupada said, just think of Krishna when you're drinking your wine. That doesn't mean to say, okay, everybody, down at the off license, get yourself a carry out and think of Krishna. We can understand that's a special circumstance. And Prabhupada was so compassionate, he didn't want to hold anybody's past against them. That your past is in the past, come to Krishna conscience, you get a clean slate. So Malati and Shyamasundar, they had been, before they became devotees, they were involved in in the youth hippie culture in those days, I think everybody and their pal was dealing drugs. So before they joined, they'd actually got caught and they were due to appear in court. And they said to Prabhupada, we have to leave and go back to such and such place, wherever it was, California or something. He says, because we have a court case. And he said, oh yeah, what's that? He says, well, we were dealing drugs. He says, I also used to deal drugs because Prabhupada was a pharmacist. So first of all, he's diminishing the transgression that they may have made. And he says, but we may have to go to jail for this. He says, well, Krishna was born in the jail. So he's just relating everything to Krishna consciousness and letting the devotees know that whatever you did in the past, if you have to go to jail, fine, that's fine. Go to jail, do your time. Doesn't mean to say you can't be a devotee. And devotees would go to Prabhupada and says, because of our past activities, or drinking, taking drugs, smoking, or whatever else they were up to, then they've compromised their intelligence, or they have so many conditions. And Prabhupada says, just this body is a bad bargain. Just make the best use of a bad bargain. So whatever condition it is, we just, or whatever we've done to harm ourselves, then we just have to make the best use of it, because even at its best condition, it's still a bad bargain for the eternal spirit soul. So I just wanted to point out these 2 points. It's important for us to preserve the legacy of Srila Prabhupada. It's important for us to understand what it is we're preserving, what is that mood that we're trying to preserve, and to remain within that family. Even sometimes families can have disagreements, but the worst thing is that the families stop cooperating with each other. If they have some problem, they try to work it out amongst themselves. Prabhupada says there may be disagreements amongst the devotees, but there should never be contention. So when it becomes contention, then that means that we're not under Prabhupada's direction, under his shelter. So disagreements may be there, but we can try and work them out, because that's also mentioned in the Bhagavatam that, I think it's 11th canto, that in Kali Yuga, even Paramahamsas get confused about what to do in Kali Yuga. Kali is so strong. But Prabhupada has created such a wonderful association of devotees that if we're looking for the answers to questions, so there's 2 purposes for asking a question. Anybody know what they are? If you're asking a question, why would you be asking a question?
Clarify one's own doubts.
Clarify one's doubts. Yeah, or to eradicate your doubts, right? Another one is sometimes people ask questions. So one is to ask questions to learn more, to know more, to be better in knowledge, to find out something, to eradicate your ignorance. Another reason people ask questions is an excuse to deny something. Just like sometimes you see reporters will ask a question and they've already given the answer in their question, and they become very expert at this, at basically becoming judge, jury, and executioner. The question is asked and the answer is given, and the person has to defend themselves. But that's simply, for example, well, where did God come from? Who created God? And we can easily just say, well, what caused the Big Bang? There's a cause of all causes. At least we can say Krishna is a person, the cause of all causes. Where can we see anything which has happened which is not caused by a person? So 2 ways to ask questions. And Prabhupada, sometimes when you hear him speak, you see he's not answering the question literally. Sometimes he's answering the reason why the person's asking that question. So for example, Prabhupada was on the train and one man said to him, he's Prabhupada surrounded by some disciples, and one Indian man said to him, so Prabhupada was talking about surrendering, finding a guru and surrendering to guru as representative of Krishna. And the man says, oh yes, but nowadays it's very difficult to find pure devotee. And Prabhupada says, so what is pure devotee? And he couldn't answer. And he says, so how are you going to find one if you don't know what one is? And then he says, you cannot find a devotee because you don't want to surrender. So if we're honest about it, then that's fine. But when you're trying to cover up that, then that becomes a bit devious. But Prabhupada exposed that. And then when Prabhupada exposes, he's not doing that to ridicule a person. He's doing that to show the person, no, this is the reason you're asking this. You're not doing yourself any favours. I'm concerned for your eternal well-being. You're trying to swerve the truth. So he was an example of asking the question so that he didn't have to surrender. He's already given the answer. But nowadays, yeah, I would surrender, but there's no pure devotees to surrender to, so therefore, that's fine, don't. So Prabhupada also, in his one letter, he says that one should seek out the association of pure devotees or devotees. So that means you get some people say, oh, there's no pure devotees in ISKCON, therefore don't expect me to put my trust in it. But if they're really followers of Prabhupada, they would have read that. Prabhupada says association of pure devotees or devotees. And he says the association of the worst devotee is better than the association of the best non-devotee. So imagine you were stuck in a desert island and you had the association of some devotee who really gets up your nose, or association of some non-devotee. Which would you prefer? Don't know, maybe some of you might choose the non-devotee, but with a devotee of any caliber, you can always talk about Krishna. And as we're on the path of devotional service, sometimes the person we find difficult to tolerate is the person who's teaching us the most valuable lesson. Because sometimes we see in others what's in ourselves. So in order to prevent this Krishna conscious movement being hijacked by some kind of apasampradaya, then it's important we get to know Srila Prabhupada as a person, his mood, the mission he's representing, how he applies Desha Kalapatra, 10 place and circumstance, and what priority of values he has. And the more we get to learn about Srila Prabhupada, the more we can appreciate him as the inspiration and the driving force of this Krishna conscious movement. So there are 26 qualities of a devotee. I'm not going to ask anyone to list them all. There was a book written by Satsvarup Maharaj some time ago, and you can find them listed in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and online. And so some of these qualities we may have to some degree, but when you look at the life of Srila Prabhupada, and one devotee actually wrote this small booklet here. It's called Srila Prabhupada, Beautiful Transcendental Qualities. So it's 26 qualities of devotee. And the devotee has given an example of Srila Prabhupada in all of these different qualities. And when we see that, and we see the example, the Acharya means one who teaches by example, we see the living example, then that gives us something to aim towards. When we see Srila Prabhupada behaving like that, we think, I should behave like that too. I remember one time Bhagavan Das gave a lecture and he said, when your mind says do this, say, no, I can't do that, I'm a devotee now. So if your mind's trying to take you back into some past activity or past way of thinking, then we have to preach to ourselves. And if we want to know what is a devotee, then we look at Srila Prabhupada and see this is the exceptional example of a pure devotee. So going back to that train journey when Prabhupada says the reason you can't find a pure devotee is because you don't want to surrender, then Prabhupada finished it by saying, actually, there are many pure devotees on this planet right now, but because you don't want to find one, because you don't want to surrender, you won't find one. Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur, no, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur actually, he stated that you can tell the potency of a devotee by how many people he converts to Vaishnavism. Converting to Vaishnavism doesn't mean to say how many people you shaved up in the last month. You know, if you started a barber shop, you might get a few. Or how many people you put in a new fashion of dhoti or sari, tilak. But actually converting to Vaishnavism, and in this regard, in the short few years that Prabhupada was active, he had made at least 10,000 devotees, and everyone who became a devotee after that is a knock-on effect by everyone who Prabhupada made a devotee. And right now I don't know if there's actually a number been estimated as to how many devotees there are. Does anybody know?
I had the GBC, we were looking at it and they said somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000.
Okay. Yeah, and that's probably just what they know. Because we do meet people who have been chanting on the street and people who have been offering the food. We met one guy in Dundee years ago. He came up to us on the street and he said, well, I've got that book, Higher Taste, and I've got the Chant Be Happy, I've got this and that. And he says, but I want to ask a question because we're offering our food, but the family are not very happy. Oh, why is that? Do they not want to eat prasadam? Do they want meat? He says, no, it's not that. He says, the food's always cold. And he said, well, how come? He says, well, we offer it to a picture of Krishna like it says in the book. He says, but we leave it there for about half an hour, and by the time we serve it, it's all cold. I says, well, what you do is you get Krishna his own little plates and bowls, you offer a sample of it, that's offered to Krishna, everything's considered offered, and you keep the lid on everything, and you only leave it on for a few minutes and take off. He says, oh, they'll be happy to hear that now. And people, there was a boy and a man in Liverpool. He met the devotees in the street and he wanted beads. And he says, what for? He says, well, my dad just passed away and I put my beads in his coffin. I've been chanting for about 20 years. Nobody knew him, but this man had been chanting on his own. So we don't know how many. And Prabhupada said, even if the soul movement stops, the books are out there, it will carry on. But if we engage in service in this movement, then we get the credit. Prabhupada wants us to get the credit. Just like Srila Prabhupada says that his spiritual master, or Lord Chaitanya, could single-handedly spread the mission, but they wanted us to get the credit. So that is the example of, if you help someone get to the top of a hill, you automatically get there yourself. So when we're helping someone on the path of Krishna consciousness, we're helping ourselves as well. We're serving the mission. So with regard to Prabhupada's potency, then someone once asked him, such and such Swami, he's done this miracle, and such yogi, he does this mystic feat. And someone's got prapti siddhi, they get a couple of apples and things like this. He says, but what's your miracles? And he says, these are my miracles. And the reporter asked him, what do you mean? He says, previously they were all eating meat, taking intoxication, illicit sex, gambling. He says, now they don't do any of that. So Prabhupada was always showing this is the real thing. And he wasn't shy to call out bogus gurus and swamis as well. He wasn't thinking, well, I'm a swami, they're a swami, we don't say anything about each other, old boys club, old swamis club. He would call them out in public. Another reporter asked him what he thought about a swami. He said he's bogus. And the reporter became interested. He said, what about this one? He's another rascal. He said, oh, my son follows him. And he said, and your son's a bigger rascal. And it's a fact, because if we follow someone who's a rascal, that means you're perpetuating that, isn't it? You're putting them there. You're giving them some credibility. If someone shows up and nobody takes them seriously, they're not going to get anywhere. But if we want something cheap, then that's why Prabhupada also gave us what are the qualifications of a guru. So in his preaching also, he spoke the truth in Kali Yuga. The dharmic principles, the 4 dharmic principles, what are those? There's 4 in the 4. It was, and the beating of the bull by personality of Kali, he'd already broken 3 legs, and he was having a go at the last one, right? What were the other 3 legs representing? Mercy. Yeah, cleanliness, mercy, truthfulness, and austerity. And the engagement of the 4 sinful activities is what is destroying these other activities. So gambling would destroy truthfulness, for example. And of course, gambling doesn't just mean, oh, I don't play the lottery. I don't go down to the casino. Gambling also can mean that we have this rare human form of life and we're thinking, Anyahani Bhutani Gachanti Hayamalayam. The most wonderful thing in this world is that every moment the souls are flocking to the house of death, but a foolish person thinks they will not die. We're thinking, yeah, that's true, but not me. Even we hear that verse and we're still thinking, yeah, but I've got plenty of things to do. I've got a whole agenda of things to do. So Krishna wouldn't take me yet. But we have no guarantee. And therefore it's important that we follow Prabhupada's footsteps. If we don't speak, sometimes we're couched in our preaching activities. Like sometimes, for example, when we did a volunteer program here, we had a no preaching policy. That doesn't mean to say that we were not interested in giving them Krishna consciousness. It meant that we could engage people in devotional service, agyata sukriti, unknowingly, they get sukriti, they get some meritorious work, or it's even more so, it's actually in devotional service, but unknowingly, and they get prasad every day. But we also let it be known that if you have any interest, you're welcome to come to any of the temple programs. And on account of that, then some people become devotees, but also we were getting a lot of things done here, and people become favourable. Many of them for overseas, so they become devotees somewhere else, which was good for them. But also we should have other programs. So for example, we do also a Kirtan Yoga program, and in that, typically we can address down a bit so as not to intimidate people. If you get 15 devotees just coming off a high-powered Hare Nam, strolling into Om Sri Om, and they're still really fired up, then people who are just walked in for the first time for some Kirtan Yoga experience, and the devotees are on a Hare Nam high, then it could be a bit intimidating for them. So we have to consider different strokes for different folks, as they say. But then also there has to be programs for those who can take it directly. Otherwise, you may find that some people would hear it, because I remember speaking with one devotee, and he was quite shy, but he wouldn't actually educate the other brahmacharis. And I said, well, they're not going to learn by osmosis. Just because you're following, they're not just going to pick up ESP and think, okay, what's he thinking? Maybe he wants me to stay awake in japa, or maybe he wants me to clean the toilet. You have to tell them. Krishna consciousness, yeah, certainly by personal association, it says that by the sight of a devotee, one is raised in the mode of goodness, but we have to go a bit more on that, more than that. So when we, for example, someone who comes to live in the temple, then they're signing up for a life of a discipline. They're signing up to be told what to do, to be trained in Krishna consciousness. When we become disciples, disciple means we put our faith in our chosen spiritual master to discipline us to become devotees of Krishna. Now, discipline doesn't always mean you get shouted at or you get chastised. Sometimes it might be there. It is one of the duties of the spiritual master, but it's not the only duty. The spiritual master has many ways of encouraging the disciple. And out of love, just like sometimes the parents, they have to stop the children from doing something which is harmful for them, no matter how much the child screams about it. The parent knows this is wrong, it can't let you do this. An example there was given when Prabhupada was a householder. He was in his house in Calcutta, and one of his sons used to always want to touch the fan, and he kept on trying to stop him. And his friend says, no, let him touch it once. So he let him touch it, and then as soon as he touched it, the boy started crying. And then Prabhupada would say to the boy, you want to touch again? So this is like us as well. The spiritual master, he'll try to give us instructions, but sometimes we're too thick to actually get it, and he has to say, listen, I'm telling you, do this. Like Prabhupada, there was one devotee, they were on a morning walk, and I can't remember the details. If anybody does, they can offer them. But one devotee said something foolish, and Prabhupada stopped, and he turned and says, I've been telling you for 10,000 births, and still you can't hear. But the spiritual master has the potency to penetrate the darkness. So we see this verse, Om Jnana Tamarandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurunling Talmaya Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and my spiritual master, sometimes it's translated forced open, is forcing open my eyes. Because sometimes we don't want to open. He said, open your eyes, and we're going, no. And he said, open. I'm trying to show you the spiritual world. No, I'm okay where I am. No, you're not, you're suffering. We're thinking we're okay, this is Maya. Sometimes the devotees, we tell them in Maya, there's like, Prabhu, that's Vaishnava Parad. You said I'm in Maya. But maybe we're not in a position, it's like, have you had a look at yourself recently? Seen the Maya you're in? Now we all see, typically we all see each other's faults, right? We don't see our own. Because we don't want to see our own faults. But as it's called self-realization, it's better that we focus on what we have to do to ourselves than what everybody else has to do. Because even if everybody else becomes perfect, then how has that helped us? It's helped us that we don't had to make any effort to change or improve. And Prabhupada spoke very strongly. So in terms of preaching, sometimes it's softly, because we're trying to cultivate people to the point where they can hear. It's not that simply we're happy to just have some Shri Ram, Jai Ram and a plate of pasta. But we're hoping that by this purification, they'll come to a class and they'll be able to hear the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And recently the devotees have been doing a program in Glasgow, Om Sweet Om, which is feeding the people that they meet on the street who have been reading the books or who got the books to come to such a program where they can ask questions about what they've been reading, and it gives the devotees a chance to preach quite straightforwardly and to dispel people's misconceptions about life, even sometimes about spiritual life, like so they can get the real understanding. And Prabhupada spoke strongly about bogus spiritual leaders and followers, about the Mayavadi philosophy and animal slaughter and slaughterhouse of intelligence, or the educational system. So not that we wouldn't use anything which was a byproduct of the educational system, but his criticism was there's no department for understanding the science of the soul. They talk about knowledge, institutions of knowledge, but regardless of all the subjects they have, no one's becoming any wiser, no one's making any progress to become free from Janma, Mrityu, Jara and Vyadi, birth, death, old age and disease. When Prabhupada arrived in Boston Harbor, then he composed that prayer, Markini Bhagavat Dharma, which if you read that is full of compassion, because immediately he could see that the place is governed by Rajas and Tamas, by the mode of passion and ignorance. And as Kali Yuga progresses, then mode of ignorance becomes even more prominent. So therefore, out of compassion, then he was praying to the Lord, simply use me as your puppet. And Prabhupada tolerated so many crazy things simply for the sake of pushing on this worldwide movement. If you read some of the early days and you speak to some of the early devotees, then they find it either they're embarrassed or they find it quite amusing that they would behave like that in those days. And we look at our own life as well, where we came from. Then Prabhupada was tolerating so much so that we could benefit from Krishna consciousness. Even his own god brothers were criticizing him, but he understood that they didn't understand what was necessary. He asked for help, they didn't come. So therefore, even it's usually a sannyasi shouldn't perform a wedding ceremony, right? A person in their own sort of life, what business does he have being at a wedding, what to speak of doing a wedding ceremony? But who was there to do it? Prabhupada had to do it, start a worldwide movement all on his own. So he is expert in the art of doing the needful, Deshakalapatra. And he would engage so many devotees and tolerate so many things. One time, Satsvarup Maharaj, I think he did something wrong and he was quite regretful to it. And he went to Prabhupada and he apologized and said, you know, I do so many things. What would you like me to be? He says, well, the one that does this and this, he says, that is a nice, his name was Stephen at that time. That is a nice back to Stephen. So he was encouraging him to do a more positive thing. So Prabhupada is setting these examples. He tolerated those, and we've also been tolerated. The fact that we are still in association means that we've been tolerated despite our shortcomings, and we also have to tolerate others. This is the association of devotees learning to tolerate members. Kripa Mahaprabhu was saying that the very devotees that you find yourself living with may be the ones who are the cause of your liberation from this material world, which I think is a very important point. Because even if you're associated with the pure devotees, how long could we associate with them before our mind says, oh, this is too much? So we need to have association of different types of devotees, juniors, so that we can practice engaging people and being compassionate, and peers, so we can share and engage in service with, and seniors, so that we can reveal our mind in confidence. So I just wanted to list a few things there which I thought would be important for us just to remember that how much Prabhupada has given us, how much his influence has been on our lives. Most of these things our lives revolve around. And if you've got any other ones you want to ask. So he gave us Goraksha, cow protection in farms. So he preached against animal slaughter, and he gave the practical alternative, which is cow protection. And then for those who found it difficult to engage in frontline preaching, or who had an inclination towards self-sufficiency, And then he also wanted the farms. And then he gave us sadhana bhakti. We all have some kind of form of sadhana. Everyone's doing a bit of sadhana here, whatever your sadhana might be. Atoksha Prabhu's got one contact. He goes around the businesses and he collects funds. He usually sees people once a year, sometimes twice a year. And they give regular donations, and many of them have got the books and they're favourable. And there's one guy who comes every New Year Harinam, and we're considering that's his sadhana. He gets one Harinam in a year. So our sadhana might be 1 round a day, 16 rounds a day, or whatever we're doing. Try to do something regular so that we can build on that. Prabhupada has given us that. We have sadhana at the temple, we have sadhana at home, and trying to balance that within the material world is always a difficulty. He gave us festivals as well, the Rath Yatra festival, Janmashtami, Gaur Purnim. Even Prabhupada says that even if there's no particular festival in the calendar, we can have festivals just for the sake of it, just for the devotees. So this is the type of recreation for devotees, Harinam, festivals, taking prasad together. This is recreation for devotees. And sometimes going on a picnic, going for a swim, things like that. Swimming is Vaishnava sport. He gives deities. We have deities at the temple, we have deities at home. And he gave us the standards of those. He also showed us the difference in standards between temple standard and home standard. He gave us Tulsi also. And he gave us service, he gave us the holy name, he gave us his books which contain the proper Siddhanta, which contain many examples there to protect us from philosophical or sensual fall downs. And within these books, magazines, etc., he's given us the knowledge of the fallen condition and the way out of that. And within the books also, they have paintings which are known as... Exactly. Go into the spiritual world. Anyone get any experience you'd like to share regarding that?
Just when you show people the pictures on the street, they're always very amazed by it. Some people will just buy the books just based on the pictures.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, just discovered recently, Prabhupada said that this changing body diorama should be in every temple. So maybe we have to get somebody to make one. Yeah, these windows to the spiritual world, it's funny because when myself and my friends, before we became devotees, there's quite a few of us were reading Prabhupada's books. And although we couldn't really understand too much of the books, looking at the pictures was just so attractive. And then one devotee, we met a devotee and he says, yeah, these are windows to the spiritual world. We really felt like it because it was like looking into another world which you wanted to be a part of. And you were invited to that. And Prabhupada was directing these devotees personally how to paint pictures of Krishna. Even one devotee said, oh, there's so many paintings of Krishna, which one is actually him? And he says, what are you talking about? They're all Krishna. And devotees have different favourite pictures. Some of them look like cartoons, some of them look like a certain style or whatever. But however we are attracted to Krishna, because Krishna is all attractive, then if that inspires us, then that's important. He gave us association of devotees. He gave us Sanatan Dharma, which is not sectarian. It's not Hindu Dharma, because Hindu is a misnomer, as Prabhupada would say. It was given by Mohammedans who lived on the other side of the Indus Valley, called them Hindus. And for some reason or other, they accepted that, why they want to accept that, but now that's changing. And largely this is due to Prabhupada's influence. The Sanatan Dharma is the eternal religion. And in this way, one who understands Sanatan Dharma, this is different, is that they're not sectarian. Prabhupada would talk about how Krishna consciousness is not a sectarian religion. It's because it's about the eternal religion. So anyone who's practicing that, regardless of what their faith may be, then it's still Sanatan Dharma. There's an example of this I can't remember if it was a magazine or if it was in SSR. But Prabhupada was speaking with one German priest, and he was so convinced by Prabhupada, he says, should I just come and join you? And Prabhupada said, no, you should stay where you are and preach God consciousness from your position. So Prabhupada felt that he could be more useful there. Same with George Harrison. He was prepared to shave up, join the temple, get initiated. Prabhupada says, there's no need, you're already son of Hari, Hari's son. And he knew that George could do better preaching in his own position. He was already accepting Prabhupada. And that's evident in the songs that he wrote. Prabhupada showed him how to write songs about Krishna. And he gave us Varnashram, although he did say that he felt his mission was only half accomplished because he felt that he would like to have spent more time on that. But still, we didn't even know about the definitions of Varnas and Ashrams. He gave us purpose of life, so you could put it into two categories. One is a Tato Brahma Jigyasa, which is anybody. Now that we have this human form of life, it's time to inquire about knowledge of the self. And another one is Prema Pumarta Mahan, which is the goal of life is to develop Krishna Prema, or love of God. So that begins with self-realization, isn't it? Realizing I'm not this body. And then from there, it's like, okay, not only not this body, but what are you? And what is your relationship to Krishna? So that's all been given by Prabhupada. And he gave us the GBC as well. And the GBC is there. Coming from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he wanted to establish that. His disciples didn't. And Prabhupada did it on behalf of his guru. So this is, the Parampara wanted this. And he gave us prasadam, which we'll be getting in just a half an hour. So even vegetarian is not enough. Prabhupada would say, I think it was in the Upanishad, that even the pigeon is vegetarian. Although I don't know if the Glasgow pigeons are vegetarian. I think they just, whatever they can get their wee beak into. Poor souls. They always remind me of like maybe city businessmen with their black and grey suits on. Like maybe they've taken birth in Glasgow city centre because they were attached to being in there. That's just my speculation, don't quote me on that. But you feel quite sorry for them, you know, what kind of life do they have? But Prabhupada says being vegetarian isn't enough, because food which is prepared for sense gratification without being offered to Krishna, then people who eat that are verily eating only sin. So there's still a reaction, karma bandhana. So Prabhupada has given us that almost